Good evening, everyone. I'm going to share a story with you about an administrator at a small urban school here in Southern California and some of the trials and tribulations that went about in that time. So in this scenario, we begin with the principal, who we'll call Mr. Garcia, was serving during his first year of service. Um, he had two African American teachers who literally resigned mid-year, claiming that they had been racially discriminated against by the principal. Towards the end of the year, four veteran teachers who had been at that school site for upwards of 20 some years, all four of them requested transfers. Three of them were Caucasian and one was an African American woman. And on their transfers, they stated that they felt that they were discriminated against and made to feel uncomfortable in the work environment. Beginning in the second year of his service, or the second week of school, the school psychologist who had been at that school for about 18 years literally walked off campus and went to the district and said, I will refuse to return to that school because of how I've been treated. And so she left at the second week of school. The RSP teacher, who was also an African-American woman, on her third week after having a confrontation with the principal, she was transferred in after when the other ones had transferred out. She was forced to transfer to the school site and took the RSP position. Within 3 weeks, she had had at least two confrontations with the principal and talked to the district about transferring to another school. She was granted that transfer right around December. And it took them about a month and a half to hire a new RSP teacher. The sad part about it, within a week, this RSP teacher, I was a union rep at the school. Within 2 weeks, this RSP teacher was standing at my door, literally in tears, about how she was being treated. And she was a Caucasian woman. Finally, of course, at the end of that year, I also was able to leave before the end of the school year. So I'm going to talk about some of the critical issues that we considered for this scenario. And I also asked a couple of questions. Considering the issues brought forth in the scenario, where were the breakdowns in communication? So I first started about is the first thing that happens when there's an issue is a teacher will go to their principal and have a conversation. Right? In this scenario, when you're talking to a principal who's not willing to talk to you, there becomes more problems. So you have to go through the steps as an educator. You have to go to the principal, talk. If that doesn't work, then you take your union representative. When that fails, then you can bring in the president of the union and then bring in someone from HR to try to bring about, try to fix the scenario. And then there should be some type of communication connection between the union and the district on how to solve this situation in the best way possible. But this led to my next question, because none of that actually worked. All the communication broke down throughout this whole scenario. Why was there no solution offered to the teachers other than forcing them to remove themselves from the situation? All I saw was a breakdown of responsibility, especially on the part of the district, in that so many teachers were in peril in this school, and you could see it and hear it, but no one did anything to adjust it. This led to my final question, and that was, what factors contributed and enabled the principal to create such a hostile working environment for his staff? I do have some ideas. Well, and then we'll talk about that. Number one, at the time, the district was dealing with internal problems that left it weak, and there was negligent leadership in the district. Um, he also was able to bring about, take this little crew. I didn't talk about that part. There was a crew of teachers, a core group of teachers, upper grade elementary teachers at the school, who literally were his sycophants. And they did his bidding, whatever he wanted. They followed along. They were followers. Unfortunately, they took on his nasty negative persona and mistreated the rest of the staff by ignoring their requests, by even being dismissive of them and what they were talking about. The dual language program teachers were kind of like, well, we don't care about you. And then special education, they were kind of put off to the side. So he had his little crew, and that was it. And he was happy with that. And he would literally watch some of this stuff and just smile about it. He didn't care. The last part of the problem that I see here, and it goes back to the leadership, which there was an HR director who had been called in numerously throughout all the situations to each of these scenarios. And in each of these scenarios, she chose to protect the principal rather than deal with the issue. Okay, so go forward to question number, the third scenario thing we're speaking about is discussion of issues from a legal perspective. And really and truthfully, these go back to the simple things which you see on the walls of all employee lounges. They should have one, is the Employment Non-Discrimination Act of 2009, which gives freedom from discrimination in the workplace. There shouldn't be any discrimination in the workplace or things like that. One of the other that was much powerful in my own work in the school was the certification employee handbook, the certificated employee handbook of the school district. It was very helpful, number one, because it denotes the responsibilities of all staff with regards to responsibilities and what they are to do with adherence to federal, state, and district policies. So what we had here was a number of people who were literally not following even the guidelines of the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, and the HR director was directly involved in that. So let's talk about some of the ethical perspectives. One of the first ones that popped in my head was professionalism. There was no professionalism here. From the principal to this other group, this core group of teachers who were followers, who were in the school bullying fellow teachers. He was bullying teachers. What he would do was retaliate. The moment someone wrote a letter, he would show up in their class the next day to try to cause, strife. And then there were instances of racism. Now, what was interesting was one of his little sycophants was an African American woman, but what was different was she would do anything he said, and she didn't care. She would follow along, so when people kind of were like, well, he's racist, they're like, oh, but he likes her. And so he could kind of like go, well, no, I love her, but it's still there. So it was very, very much so an attack on, and throughout the time that I was there, I watched it. He did have an issue with African American women, and it definitely had an issue with me as an African American man. Going on to another perspective that I looked at was the impact of the mistreatment of these teachers, how it impacted students ethically. That was something, because I don't care how you put it, when you are attacked at your job and made to feel as though you're not safe, it will affect your work and your work ethic, not your work ethic, I'm sorry, but it will affect your work. And that the children will be subject to that. And I'll give a brief example in that I was in a situation where I had a conversation with him, and we had an altercation, and I had to return to my classroom very, very unhappy and stressed. And so I had to tell my students, hey, you know what, guys, we're gonna have a little bit of a shutdown for a few minutes so that Mr. Harvey can get himself together. Moving on to the summary of those things, and it really was about the comparisons and contrasts of legal and ethical. Number one, you have discrimination in the workplace, which is unethical and illegal activity, especially in a school setting. And then you have the disregard for federal and district mandates that are found in the employee handbook. My recommendations for this situation, number one, is we need to train teachers and their union representatives on how to address these issues in writings. And so I came up, you can't see the book, it's backwards. Correct. Well, this is Frisk, Frisk. It's the book that I use. Honestly, it was what I used when I had to, as a union leader, I addressed this principle by utilizing the Frisk method. I would write up facts, I would write up the rules, I would write up the impact that those behaviors had on the school environment, and then I would make suggestions about what we should do in the future, and then finally and I didn't do the knowledge part, but I will say that my writing, when an altercation would happen, I wouldn't just write the letter to him because I knew there needs to be more accountability. And so when I would structure my letters, of course, using the Frisk method, I would then write to the superintendent, to the director of children's services, student services, to the director of elementary education, to the head of HR, to the union president and the vice president of the union, as well as to the union itself, to archive the letter. And the end result of that, because I literally wound up writing him up about incidents with myself and as well as another teacher about 4 times that year. And I said, each time I would write and he would receive it, he would show up in my class the next day in the afternoon, and my kids were always doing what they were supposed to do, and I was doing what I was supposed to do. So he would come in, and I know he was trying to do something, but he just couldn't get there because there was nothing to get. So, final result of the situation was when I resigned. I resigned on a Thursday, and I took my new job and started that Monday. I got a call that Monday evening from one of my fellow teachers at the former job, who said that they had received notification that day in the morning that they were asked to stay after school for an emergency staff meeting. And it was announced at that staff meeting that the principal would no longer be, that the principal would be transferred at the end of the school year. Because they were in the process. He was in the process with he and his crew of developing the more plans for, hurting people, I guess. Anyway, so the best thing I got out of the scenario was to be patient and to be as thorough as we can be when our writing, and even when dealing with someone as abhorrent as he was. Thank you.